Good evening, everyone. This is Mohammed Mishrai from Archinet. Our guest today is Nada Debs from Beirut, and it's going to talk about the renovation of the Arab League Hall in Cairo. Nada? Yes, we can see you.
Can you see me?
Yes, perfect. Thank you for being with us tonight.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Very much.
Just in
Thank
case, I will
you
turn
for
off
having
my
me.
camera. Yeah, thank you a lot. It's really an honor to have you with us tonight. I will keep my camera off just to maintain internet speed, and I please everyone also to do the same. And we will keep the questions after the presentation is done. Do you like to try sharing your screen now?
Okay. Yes. Let me just get it. 1 second. 1 second. Oh, sorry. I can't seem to find it. 1 second.
Yes.
Okay. There we are. Can you all see it? I hope.
Not yet. It didn't come up yet.
No?
Yes, now it's off.
Okay.
Perfect.
Shall I get started?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, really, Archinet and Muhammad, for inviting me. This is really an honor, and I always enjoy sharing my story because I think everybody relates to it in one way or another. So today I'll be talking about the renovation of the Arab League Hall in Cairo. But before that, I'd like to share more my journey, my personal journey. So here we go. Okay. So many years ago, I visited Istanbul and I visited the Topkapi Palace. And while I was there was a room called the Great Room of Gifts. And in this great room, there were these beautiful works of art that were given as gifts to the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire from emperors in Persia and India and China. And what you notice about all this work is the intricate details of the handcraft and the craftsmanship that was all really across the Silk Route. And for me, first of all, it just showed the value of this beautiful, anything that's made by hand is really beautiful. And secondly, it also showed me route that my forefathers took in 1917, and when they went to Japan for textile trading and textiles. So when you look at the Silk Route here, so my great uncle went in 1917. He traveled down the Silk Route, arrived in Shanghai, and then heard of opportunities in Kobe, Japan, and he settled there. And our family has been there since then. But what's really interesting about the Silk Route is the amount of trade of ideas and craft and products. So we know that silk reached Venice. We know that ceramics went to Turkey and glass to Bohemia. So there was a lot of exchange of ideas and craftsmanship and know-how. And in a way, my journey is really the same journey to the Arab world, but through the different countries that I lived in. So I grew up in Kobe, Japan, till I was about 20 years old, since I was a baby. Then I studied in Providence, Rhode Island, and then I moved to London, and then settled in Beirut 20 years ago. So my story is really my personal Silk Route. And this is how I picked up the different aesthetics of each part of the world and each continent, and how I applied it on my work. So this is my father. He went to Japan in 1950, so he's a third generation Lebanese Syrian who went to Japan. And when you look at Japan and the aesthetics of Japan, you will see that everything is about removing and simplicity and bringing everything down to its essence. So everything has this purity to it. And what's beautiful about this is the fact that when you look at beauty as if you are giving a gift to God. And for the Japanese, it's about removing and paring everything down to its essence. So when you look at their religion, often they meditate, they live in silence, and it's all about removing and emptying. And so this is something that I picked up from the Japanese aesthetics, which is kind of less is more. And here I am as a little girl, and you can see how I look so different from the rest of the world, of the Japanese people. And I was kind of like a phenomenon. I had big eyes, long eyelashes. But as a child, it was very difficult because I didn't belong, and there were no other Arabs and Muslims in the area. And so I felt left out. So in a way, I feel like my journey coming to the Arab world was a kind of journey for a sense of belonging and to kind of understand identity. And hence, for me, cultural identity is a really important thing in my life. So when I studied in the USA, London School of Design, I also noticed how the Americans thought. Because it's a young country, they looked to the future. So they had, the glass industry, the steel industry. They looked at materials, and it was like they looked to the future. They thought big. And here, I experimented a little bit with modern materials and mixing different materials like stone, marble, plexiglass, steel. And so these are like some examples of one of my first pieces I created when I was in the States. And somehow I really didn't feel I belonged still in the USA. So I moved to England thinking that UK would have a English-speaking Arab community because I didn't speak Arabic very well. And what I noticed in the UK as opposed to the US is that they looked to the past. They revered the past. So antique furniture, antique craftsmanship. This is something that they valued. And whenever I visited all these stores, this is what they always talked to me about, the hand carving and the marquetry details. And so this is where I kind of picked up the value of craftsmanship and heritage. And you can see here, I started a children's line of furniture. So on the left, you see the traditional marquetry, but on the right, you'll see that I used stained veneers to create these inlay images on furniture. So I made a whole line of contemporary children's furniture using traditional marquetry technique. So this is when I really started to be interested in craft itself. And then, of course, my journey wasn't over. I moved to Lebanon in the year 2000. And this is the year when there was the reconstructive efforts to, when the war was starting to come, the country was coming out of the civil war. And, there was this, excitement to start living in Beirut like long ago. And I wanted to be part of this kind of reconstruction effort. And I was happy to be in Beirut. And when you look at my first pieces, you'll notice that there's no influence at all from our part of the world. So you can almost think that it's a Japanese designer designed this because it's very minimalist and quite pure. So I was still very much influenced by the Japanese aesthetics. But then a friend of mine contacted me and said he's interested in opening a Lebanese restaurant in London. And I wondered, what is Middle Eastern, what is the identity of the Middle East? And someone told me, go to Damascus and you'll see. So I went to Damascus, and this is what I saw. I saw all this beautiful furniture, which is overly ornamental, with a lot of beautiful craft. But for me, this was something that was really interesting because it's so much contrast compared to Japanese, design. And I also looked at the way the Middle Easterners or Islamic way of thinking, they look at God, and that is what they consider beauty. And here it's all about geometry and the repetition of geometry. And it's all about knowledge. And when you look at the Sufi dancers who are swirling around, or when you read the Quran, or when you see the scriptures, it is all about knowledge and the repetition of knowledge and repetition of words. And so, both cultures actually reach God, but in a different approach. And so I was very interested to see how this beautiful workmanship was made, because I got interested since London. And it was really hard to find good craftsmen. I found a small door, and you wouldn't think there's anything behind. And then here you'll see this whole room of a huge workshop full of people working in intricate details. And it was, so for me, like this eureka moment. And what I saw was this beautiful group workmanship, but I felt very bad in a way, because I felt that the pieces that they were making were only fit for a certain group of people. And I felt like people like me, who are more contemporary, wouldn't really carry the kind that they were making. So I decided to ask them to make me like a panel of triangles. And here at the top, you'll see, for example, you will see the flower patterns. And they kept telling me, don't you want some flowers? And I said, no, I just want plain triangles. And today, maybe this bedside table is a very boring piece. But at the time, in the year 2001, 2002, I brought this little panel of triangle and made this table. And all of a sudden, people started to look at this traditional work in a different way. Because what I did was I incorporated a very simple form, which came from my Japanese upbringing, and the material and the craft is actually Middle Eastern. And here I'll show you just some examples of how I simplified the traditional. So it's like the traditional tables, and then I simplified the lines and then used some more modern materials. So I'll run you by these. Like this is a bench, what they call the bureau. And I also had some Japanese influences. So this is like a closet that's actually also steps in the Japanese homes that are very small. Screens were used a lot in Japan and also in our part of the world. And calligraphy, as well as hand carving of natural elements, and even the craft of parquetry. There's a little village in Japan that creates the same parquetry work, which is very similar to the backgammon games that we have here. And so in a way, I found that kind of my answer to my identity crisis, which was that I didn't have to choose between being an Arab or a Japanese. I could be both. And I called the concept East and East. So basically, it was using Middle Eastern craft and applying the minimalist philosophy of less is more. So in a way, it was a way of breathing new life to traditional craft. So I was interested to see what was really the actual architectural features that are used in this part of the world. And obviously it was geometry. And that was what was prevalent here in architecture. And I wanted to know a little bit more about it. And so basically, I think most of you probably know that it starts with a circle. The pattern, the geometric patterns start with a circle. And the circle is representative of God, unity, infinity, and the oneness of God. And when you take a circle and divide it into equal polygons, and then you repeat them, they create these patterns. And so I decided to apply these patterns on using the mother of pearl inlay craft. And from there, you'll see like all these different pieces of furniture. So the form is very pure, but then the intricacy of the work incorporated these patterns. And so you'll see how I applied carving, resin work. Here I mixed Japanese patterns with Arabic patterns. This is a bar unit. And this is like the craft of parquetry, where I also added color. So you'll see how geometry is, the repetitive geometry has been used, but in a much more contemporary way. This is also using steel and even concrete. And here's the restaurant Lisa in Paris. We used the resin work with the mother of pearl inlay. This was a completely new craft technique that we came up with. And so we use them as screens. And here, there's some other pieces of furniture we are working on. And so at that time, maybe the year 2004, 2005, I opened my first showroom. And now we have a studio space that's quite, it's in an old 1930s building. And you'll see the different spaces that we have that show our work. And this is our sample room, which is really our main, this is where I get my biggest joy, because what I do is I try to come up with new craft techniques that, that we can use that kind of gives identity to who we are, but at the same time, it's contemporary. And then, you know, over the years, we've done some international brands. This is FBMI, which is a initiative to empower the women carpet weavers in Afghanistan. So we created some carpets for them. And we had, very interestingly, Fratelli Rossetti, who I collaborated and created heels using our craft. And the latest collaboration was with IKEA, which is very democratic design. And for me, this was very prestigious because for me, who, you know, we work with very high-end luxury craft, we were able to do something that reached many people. And so for me, this was like a very, very challenging, but really wonderful collaboration. And this was launched in March at the exact same time, 1 week after the opening of the Arab League Hall. So now I'm ready to go into discussing the renovation of the Arab League Hall. So in a way, now you have the background that basically our mission is to celebrate Eastern craftsmanship through contemporary design. And this is how I felt that it was very important that we apply this into the Arab League Hall. So in 2015, I was honored, both as a designer and as a woman, to be appointed by the Ministry of Presidential Affairs of the United Arab Emirates to renovate the Arab League Hall in Cairo. I visited Cairo then to understand more about the Arab League Hall. And it turns out that the building was built in 1955 by a modernist architect, Mahmoud Riyad. And it's a very modernist contemporary style with subtle interventions of geometry. You can see here the wooden panels. And you know, you can see some of the, here, as you can see here, the entrance you'll see some geometric interventions, and here as well. But then, through several renovations over time, there became a mixture of styles and colors, and the space of the main hall lost its identity. So you felt that there's a disconnect between the entrance that you saw, which was a blue-green turquoise effect, and then you enter the hall, and the hall is like a mixture of different elements. So here you can see how, you know, you can see the panels still there, but then things were just turning a little bit dark and yellow. And so we were appointed to work on the main hall and the two lobby areas on the right and left. And so we had, the idea was to preserve the historically relevant features, but at the same time integrating state-of-the-art technology. So we had a very strict brief, and some of the features to preserve were the scriptures here above the main stage, the wooden panels, upgrading of the technical equipment. So we had to work on finding a place for the screens, iPads, microphones, wireless technology, increasing the number of delegates, of seats for the delegates, because it became very crowded. We needed newer desks for sure, and better lighting and acoustics. And the first thing that we did was actually to increase the, just to tell you one more thing. So that was the brief that they gave me. But my personal take, was to create an environment that is contemporary and peaceful, but still relevant to our Arab culture and identity, in order to enhance unity and progressive thinking. And to me, it's very important, I think, as a designer, that we really use our environment to enhance the important things that we want to enhance. And in our case, or in the case of the Arab League, I felt it was very much the idea of unity and also forward thinking. So first thing that we did was a very simple adding of the delegate seating. So we had to accommodate much more seating for all the delegates. So we decided to cut into the audience and dig into this area and add the seats. And these also are an extension of the main hall, the circle. So we decided to create a more circular, central circular unit so that we can accentuate that it is part of the main hall. And then what we needed, what I felt was needed, was a design element that can become the guideline to create a kind of coherency in the space. So what we saw is that we had the wall panels, and we took the kite shape, which is a kind of a stretched rhombus, which we found in the detail of the wooden panels. And we created a similar pattern using the curve of mother of pearl in repetitive geometry. And then here, for the flooring, marble flooring, we created a geometric star shape, so you can still see this kind of kite shape, and worked on a pattern in marquetry. As for the desks, we added a three-dimensional feel to this form, to this shape. For the ceiling, we integrated the acoustics and lighting systems into triangulated forms, creating a subtle but dynamic sense of movement. We also customized the carpet to reflect the ceiling pattern. And we played with the geometry as well. The idea was to use the same geometric repetitive shape and to juxtapose it by applying it to different mediums, materials, and functions. Each nation in the Arab world has its own identity, and yet we all are connected through geometry, hence the sense of liveliness through subtle movement. So that was the idea of taking the same geometric shape, but playing around with it with different mediums and materials and functions. So when you enter the Arab League building, as you had seen earlier, you're confronted with this rich blue-green colors and with touches of gold. And the blue-green color is quite significant in the region, and it reminds us of the fertile colors of nature. It's also a symbolic color used as an amulet of the evil eye to protect us and bring good karma. And it's a very familiar color for us. And in order to create a more consistent flow, we use these shades of blue-green as the main color of the carpet. And so this is our material and color scheme. And we juxtapose the blue-green color of the carpet, the shades of the blue-green colors, with noble materials such as travertine and Guatemala marble and walnut wood. So this is a render of our, before it actually was created. And you can see the blue-green leather, the poltrona flow, chairs, presidential chairs. And then you'll see that we contrasted it with the kind of warm beige leather of the delegates' chairs. So when it came to construction, it was very difficult because it was a very 10-meter high ceiling, and we had to build scaffolding all the way in order to change the ceiling. So we had to break down the ceiling, go all the way up down the ceiling. So there was this second level that, you know, took quite a while to work on. So we created these triangulated acoustic panels on the ceiling. And you can see how we had to climb up like 9 meters to get up to the top. And here it was finally finished, and all the acoustic and air conditioning systems were all inserted inside these panels. And then came the part where we had to kind of dig into the audience, and there was a lot of breaking. And then we built the stage, not the stage, but the backdrop. Here is where they put the flooring. So we used the movement of marquetry, of the grains of the travertine to create more geometric patterns. So you can see what we used walnut wood as opposed to the yellow oak wood that was used earlier. And here, what we did with the yellow panels, the oak wood was turning quite yellow, so we decided to unify the color by staining it to be a little bit more like walnut. And here are the desks. Placing, so the desks have this three-dimensional effect, and we use the mother of pearl inlay to kind of enhance the geometry. Of course, we visited all the workshops, and we were lucky to have really good craftsmen in Egypt, because I was used to working with my own team in Beirut, but it turns out that there's a very good team of workers who are in Egypt. So you can see all this inlay work. So all this was done by. So this is the final hall, and it's quite similar to the render that we drew. And you can see that it's more toned down in terms of color scheme. It's a brighter space, which is what they wanted. We used more noble materials, at least as it is today, and all the wireless technology was very amazingly done. So we can, just with the touch of a button, we can, talk to everybody. So you can see that we continued the kind of blue-green effect from the entrance hall as you enter into the main hall. So there's not anymore a disconnect between the two. So here are some more details as you go up the stairs, some the main, where the main people stand. And even the TV screens are now set in the wall. So it's not anymore like a screen that's just hanging down. We also are working, actually presently, we're working on home accessories because we do design home accessories. So we've taken the same kind of craft of marquetry and we've applied it to tissue holders, desk mats, coasters. And then here we come to the lobby area. And this was the lobby area. So you can see again, the color scheme was a burgundy red. It was quite dark and kind of old. So we preserved the walls, which were these beautiful Moroccan tiles. And what we did is we decided to play on the same geometry, slightly different from inside the hall. And so, you know, it kind of is, again, repetitive geometry, which is very much something that's prevalent in our part of the world. And here we created our own furniture, customized furniture, specifically for the space. And again, the same turquoise, blue-green color scheme. So here we are. To be honest, this was a very, very interesting project because we worked with the UAE team, who was, you know, the engineers who were there, as well as the teams in Egypt and also the team I have in Beirut. So I have to really thank everybody that worked because it was such a smooth operation. We had Modern Interiors contractors in Egypt. We had IFHAF, which were the local architects. Then you have, and you know, I was very happy because Modern Interiors, the boss is female. This is my team. Walid Marshi, project manager, and senior designer Cynthia Atwi. And the Arab League engineers were also there, among them lots of women, and RWA, another UAE Office of Engineers. So we were really a really big team of architects and designers, and it was a very smooth project. Although the building was old, but it was really worked very well. And March 4th, 2020 was the first opening, just before COVID. So I didn't really have time to enjoy it too much. So they had the first meeting then. And I really hope that this is, you know, something that will remain for the next few decades, and something that will be timeless, and something that would really enhance the way you know, all the nations in this part of the world will think, because I really do believe that our environment has a big input in the way we think and the way we act. So basically what I've done is I've really tried to celebrate our Eastern friendship, but in a much more contemporary way. So this is it. This is our discussion. I hope that you enjoyed it. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Nada, for the presentation. I believe this is, as you said, your celebration actually in contemporary with Arab style and for iconic project also. I had to turn off your camera during the presentation because the sound was shaky, and we will turn it off again if the sound goes shaky again.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you well. We will go with the questions, and we already notified everyone to send their questions once the presentation is done. We have plenty of questions already. The first question,
okay.
Does Nada have a mentor or ideal designer?
do I have an ideal designer that I look up to?
Yes.
Let's see. Who do I like? I like many designers. We can start. There's furniture designers, then there's also architecture. Well, so many. But for me, I like design that is really very much related to identity and craft. So anyone who works with craft. So when it comes to furniture, there's a Patricia Urquiola, who I feel works very well with craft ideas and modernizing craft. And I can't recall now in terms of architecture, but it will come to me. I will answer once I remember.
Fine. It's okay. We will go with the second question. From where and how Nada gets inspired to design?
Okay, usually I get my inspirations from people, when they're talking, or because it's very much emotionally related. I feel that design is related to emotion. So, for example, if I'm doing an interior of somebody's home, I would ask them, how do you want to feel? And then if they say they want to feel like they're in a very bright, happy, environment, then I would start with that. I think it's very human centric. I care about what people want, and hence I do a lot more custom work rather than just having my own designs and having people buy them. Because I feel like every human being has a different need and different function. And basically I use my design principles and my design, my craft techniques, and I apply it to kind of suit their needs. Sometimes craftsmen also inspire me too, because when I sit and watch the craftspeople working, what about just watching them? But because of my, I really feel that furniture should have a need, a function. Although we use geometric, it might appear decorative. It's actually, I think that kind of fulfills our emotional, especially in our part of the world. The geometric repetitive patterns kind of fulfill our emotional need for fulfilling our identity. So we relate to it, and it feels good to belong, and it feels good to relate to something. So for sure, I'm very much inspired by that.
Okay, before I continue the questions, allow me to turn off your camera just because the voice still goes shaky. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. The second, the question that I have a question about something you mentioned, that you are getting sometimes inspired when you are seeing the craftsman working. In that term, how much do you think it's very important? What is the importance for designers, especially interior designers and furniture designers, to learn and practice and see the technicalities of manufacturing, a craftsman? Does that really impact their experience or understanding in terms of designing, level of designing, and how complicated their designs can be, so they can simplify it, or even be able to design something really valuable, compatible prices, whatever?
Well, you can take. It's really important to work closely with craftsmen. It's because it's them who are doing the work. For us, it's our duty to just control it a little bit. Just so in terms of even like controlling the cost of something, you can tell the craftsman not to do too much detailed work and keep it very subtle, so that it's not too overdone. You can, when you work closely with craftsmen, you can really find a way to um, to create the products the way the way you want. For me, I think working with craftsmen, I don't know. For me, the actual craft idea of working with craft is a very meditative. Uh, it's a meditative kind of art form. And I think that that's very important for not only craftsmen, but for us when we're watching them working, because it calms us down as human beings. And I think that the more craft is done, the more peaceful our people will be. But in terms of design, I think that there's a lot to be inspired from that. We always think that we should just stick to, like when we watch someone doing inlay work, that we should stick to only wood. But when you start kind of introducing modern materials, like maybe even recycled materials or upcycling, it's very interesting to actually even give the craftsman something new to do. And this is kind of what I do is I challenge them. I said, can you try to do this technique with with a modern material or something unexpected? So it's kind of fun to work with them because I play with them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me go to the second question. Actually, it's the second part of the question. Other ways to say how do you, actually, we already answered that. Sorry, I will go to the third question. It's from Ala. The question about the curtains that we have in the lobby area for the Arab League. What kind of material do you have for the curtains? If you go back to the slides a little bit, because it's good to mention how it's designed on the fabric materials. Actually, in the lobby.
Here, this is actually not. Yeah, here's a logo. So this is not fabric. It's actually it's wooden screens. So we decided to do wooden screens rather than
perforated.
fabric.
Okay.
Yeah.
So perforated. Okay. Type.
Fabric. Can you see the close up?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Another one?
Yes.
Okay. So let me go to the next question. This is from Daniel. Okay. How do you think we can create a timeless design that can stay in power for years to come?
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. But I think that, I think by keeping it very understated, by not over doing it. And I think actually when we do these repetitive patterns, there's something very understated about them because it's there's a fine line between overdoing it and underdoing it. And this is where, it's always about finding a balance. Something timeless is something that, first of all, I think if the quality of the product is good, that would be timeless. That's number one. So I'd rather, when people talk about sustainability, I tell them, buy something that lasts a long time than buy something that's, made out of paper or something. So that's something very important to me, that you buy something that lasts a long time. I think that also when something is handmade, there's something very timeless about something that's made by craft. Like I had shown you for the gift of the emperors. These are things maybe fashionably it comes and goes, but these are things that are made by hand always last very long. It's something that stands the test of time. So I'm a big believer of handcrafted objects. I hope that helps.
Yes, actually, we had a second question that you mentioned something about sustainability. The question is, do you consider sustainability in your designs?
Yeah, I that's a hard one. I
Yes.
consider sustainability as creating something that lasts a long time. That's what I consider sustainable. And sometimes I even like things to take long to make. So when something takes a long time to make, most of the time it's something that lasts a long time. So this is how I look at sustainability. Today, if I just go and buy, I don't know, use plastic to create a piece of furniture, I don't feel that it's sustainable for me. I feel it's something that might not last so long. So when you use noble materials like stone, brass, wood, these things,
Mm.
I think that they're timeless and they stand the test of time.
Okay. Do you think, because you mentioned something about something takes a long time to manufacture or to produce, doesn't that make it expensive?
Yeah, it does make it expensive. But then, like, let's say, can you see the table that's
Yes.
here? So, for example, it's completely filled with tin inlay. So there's someone who actually filled um, uh,
Yes.
inlaid tin all throughout the table. But in this case, we can choose just to put the tin inlay on the surface only. We don't have to put it on the sides. So there's always ways to reduce it, but still keeping, kind of the essence of the design. Or we can exaggerate the pattern so that it's much bigger in size, so that you can just add some tin lines. It would still have some handcrafted effect, but then it won't be as expensive. So there are always ways to make things less expensive. So like when I work, I often ask the client, it's very hard, sometimes they don't have a budget, but I tell them, please, can you give me like a maximum budget? So then what I do is I work backwards and I find out like, I say, okay, for this budget, I can do work for this amount of time. And so this is how I work to make sure that people, I like the idea. Some people think that I'm very expensive, but actually, I try to accommodate people's budgets as much as possible.
Okay. You mentioned, this is another question, and it's notable that you mentioned a lot about craftsman, handmade. Do you have any kind of laser cutting, CNC routers, or everything you are being done handmade and craftsman?
Well, I try. I tell my craftsmen and my woodworkers, I'm like, please try to use as much of your hands, as much as possible. But I mean,
Okay.
we cannot deny we cannot deny technology. Technology is something that's there. So like in terms of like, for example, the screens that you saw earlier, these were done by CNC machines.
Yes.
It's used for commercial space. Maybe for smaller items, I would use handmade. Like the chairs, the chairs I have, for example, this chair, because it's on a curve, it's much more difficult to do it on CNC machines. So in this case, it's done by hand. So usually I design things that are forced to be made by hand.
Yes. Yes.
I like
Okay.
that.
We have a question from Basma. The question is, being a professional
Mhm.
architect working in the field for many years now, do you face challenges from others because of your gender or being a manager? If so, how do you deal with these challenges and what advice you can give for young female architects and designers?
Look, in the Arab world, we do sometimes face that, but for me, I really have belief in my work rather than me being a female designer. So I actually try to ignore the gender different. I work with it. I some people might take credit for some of the things I do, and I know better in my head. So I continue my belief that I know that I had designed it, and I don't allow the gender issue to enter me, because I think that if I start thinking that way, and then actually happen. So I'd rather not allow that kind of thought to go through my head, and believe really in the strength of my work. So we have to be very fully aware of what we've done, and eventually people will know who did the work and who didn't. But it's not easy, I think, in the Arab world, but I think we need to be really strong inside of us, and I think we will surpass. And if I can be an example for others, I'm very proud to do that, because I think, designing this hall, as a woman, female designer, I think it sets a good example for the other women in the Arab world. So I'm very proud of that. And we had a
Okay.
lot of women in our team, so that was really great, among contractors and everybody.
Okay. The next question is from Adrian. What do you enjoy the most of your design process?
Okay. What I enjoy the most is actually coming up with new craft techniques. For me, like when I think of another material, like for example, when I did the inlay work in resin, that was the very beginning, maybe 15 years ago, and that was like a revolution in a way, because so many people then started to incorporate craft in resin. So for me, the biggest joy is actually in my sample room, where I show all kinds of craft techniques, because what it's done, I mean, a lot of people ask me, oh, how do you feel many people copied you? And I say that it's okay, because for me, I'm given opportunities to these craftsmen to have more work to do and something different to do than they've been doing all these years. So um, coming up with these new craft techniques, gives a chance for me to be challenged all the time with something new to do, because then the people who actually imitate what I do have to keep coming up with new things to do to imitate. So
You have
yeah,
to keep
so my
learning.
biggest joy is actually coming up with new crafts. Yeah, exactly. But I'm constantly challenged. So far, I haven't run out of ideas. Maybe one day I will, but that's where I enjoy doing collaborations, because then you're mixing different people, different ideas together.
Okay, this question from Sarah. With your esteemed experience, what is your role now in the office? How do you play? How do you function with the team? Is there any tasks that you fully delegated to your team and never look at it? Or you get my question?
Uh, you mean, am I like very controlling in my designs?
No. Let me tell you her question. She's saying after your all these years of experience, what is your responsibility in the studio, and when the time that you can say I can trust my team can do this work alone.
Oh, when I can trust. Okay. Well, look, it took a while. It took a while, because I'm very hands-on. I mean, I even sit with my team, because I'm very much like, I go to the craftsmen, I go to the woodworkers, I sit with my team. But when you're there and they see you, just by example, they start understanding, and they start doing what you're doing. And oftentimes I actually just give the idea, the kind of creative direction, and I leave it up to them. And then they come back with me with ideas, and then we kind of fine tune it. So I just make sure that my brief at the beginning is very clear. And then after that, I'm also very open to the young generation. I mean, to be honest, sometimes I run out of ideas and I like input from them. And so I think it's very important to listen to new ideas because today people and the young generation of designers are so exposed through the internet and through Instagram that I feel that it's very important that I listen to what's happening. Because I have my maybe what we call wisdom of time, but there's also innovation, innovative ideas, and these are really important to keep our eye out. And I think this new generation is much more in tune with that. So yeah, I don't like to be considered a boss. I like to be considered a colleague.
Yeah, we still have 4 questions to go, and one of them is related to this.
Okay.
In terms of managing the studio and the designs, is it different to be working with someone who owns the office and the office itself carries the brand of the name, such as your studio? Your studio is not a Debs. It's not like X company, so you will have your hands in everything because you are protecting your name exactly. So let's leave this to the last before we leave, and I will get the other remaining questions. Then we can back to who's the architects or designers you admire. Then we can wrap up. We have a question from Ammar. Do patterns speak a dialogue to each other? Is there a conversation in your patterns you have selected?
Is there a conversation?
Yeah, for the patterns, do you feel that the patterns, when you select the patterns or design patterns, the repetitive patterns, do you feel that they are speaking together, that they have this dialogue together?
I personally think so. Maybe it might look, maybe sometimes like in this case in here, wait, trying to go. Yeah, it might look like it's very crowded but I think that it's more, when you step back and you just feel this sense of repetition and this sense of elation when you look at something repetitive. It's kind of like a modern way of the way the Middle Eastern design is, because even if you look at architecture, you have like I forgot the name of it, the beehive effect in the mihrab, or for example, then you have the calligraphy that's bordering the ceiling. So, in a way, it's a modern version of the traditional way we work with different kinds of geometries. So, yeah, I like to scale up, scale down, add texture, remove texture. So I like to play and mix patterns together. And it's really very subtle because sometimes it could be overdone. And so we spend a lot of time trying to make it work so that it's balanced and it's not neither done too much or done too little.
Okay.
So yeah, I believe there is a yeah.
Please. Yeah. The next question is about, since you are very technical, creative, you spend your experience years in designing and working in the field. Do you think which is more important for the designer, the new generation? Is it the many years of experience or the study like master's, PhD, etc.?
I think experience. I'm a big believer of hands-on experience, but I think we do need to have like design training and a little bit of how to think conceptually. I think learning technical drawings and things, that's easy. That can be done anywhere. But what education can give you, I think, is how to think conceptually. And I'm grateful to Rhode Island School of Design because I think they didn't tell us about budgeting and things like that. What they taught us is how to think conceptually so that before we design, we have a concept in mind rather than just doing something technically good. So you don't need a PhD, but I think you need to know how to think and then the rest is just about skills.
Okay, the last question is, when it comes to crafts, do you believe in form follows function or vice versa? Is it the ethics or the functionality that you count on when you propose a design?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know that a lot of times the patterns might look decorative, but often it usually follows a kind of function. So like even with wood, like certain, the grains of the wood, the direction of wood, for me, it's so important how I apply it. Um, so yeah, I go into little details like that, but form follows function is something that was in that school of thought. I was very much in the school of thought of anything decorative is a big no-no. And so when I actually ended up in the Arab world and I saw all this use of patterns, I was like, how am I going to use this pattern? Because my first pieces, as you've all seen, is quite modernist and quite pure and simple. And here I come and I'm confronted with all this geometry. And so when I apply it, I really use it as much in a subtle way as possible. So I don't see it as a decorative. First of all, because it's handcrafted, I'm using a craftsman. So that's already the use of the craftsman and the energy behind the craft that people feel in the pieces. That's very important for me. It's a subtle message of positive energy because this is something I always say. When you cook for someone, food is always very good, and we don't know how to explain that. It's energy. And I think when
Yes.
someone is doing craft, you feel that you feel the energy of the craftsman, because craft work is actually an act of giving, an act of immersing your attention and your love into the work. And so what people feel is a subtle kind of function. It's not literally, when they say form follows function, it's not literally a physical function, but it's an emotional function. And I think that's very important and we shouldn't neglect it.
Thank you. Like before we wrap up, we have two questions. The first question that we want to back to it, because you told us to back to it, which is who's your ideal designer?
Oh.
Did you have anyone in mind, or just skip that question?
I do architect or designer. Architect or designer.
Let's say designers.
Designer, like product designers.
Yes.
I really like. There's a French designer that used to create furniture in Lebanon called Royer. And I really like his work because I feel that I understand he was inspired by this part of the world in a very, very, very subtle modernist way. And so I really like his work a lot. This is more like vintage style furniture. But today I really like Patricia Urquiola's work. I appreciate people who like to mix cultural. There's cultural elements. So I'm really more in admiration of people who do craft, and it's really funny because most craftsmen, we don't even know their names, and that's even
Yes.
so much more beautiful because they're so they don't care for their names to be known. They care for their craft to be seen or felt.
Yes. And this is lesson to learn actually. Okay. So let's wrap up. Thank you again for accepting our invitation, being with us tonight. The last question, the last question, which actually came up from one of our attendees. It is. Can I ask you to give a golden advice for interior designers? Let's say general designers.
Golden advice. So my golden advice would be listen to me, like really be open and listen, not to be too stubborn in one's ways, because I think at the end, the successful designs are the ones that fulfill people's needs and functions. So we really have to listen to what they want. And I think that's a really important element in just listening to what people want. And then we use our design skills to apply these needs. Because at the end, we're doing design for people. It's not, just for things to just look good. It's for people to use the spaces, to get a feel for the spaces. I would say listen and be open-minded. I think that's probably the most important thing I would suggest. And also try to inspired from yourself inside, because, there's so much out there. You have to look around a lot and make sure that whatever you're bringing out is something unique and that's true to who you are, and not to imitate too much other people, because I think each person has something to offer that they can share in their designs to make people happy, really, at the end of the day.
Yes. Thank you for answering all the questions. And thank you again for being with us tonight. And thank you for everyone who attended the talk today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. And thank you for all you listeners. Really appreciate it. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.